Geralt killed the Blank-Slate Protagonist. Kind of. Let me explain. Before The Witcher there was an unspoken rule. Most games fell into one of the two camps. On one side were predefined characters. They had their own personalities, history and stories, but relatively little freedom for the player to shape who they become. On the other side were blank slates. They gave meaningful choices, player agency, and the freedom to create your own character, but often at the cost of having a protagonist with less personality, less presence, or sometimes not even a voice. You could have a memorable protagonist, or you could have player agency, but not both. Then The Witcher came along and challenged that. CD Projekt gave us Geralt of Rivia, a character with decades of history, established relationships, a defined personality, and an entire series of novels behind him. By all accounts, he should have been a terrible choice for an RPG built around player choices. And yet, how come his journey feels so personal? Why does almost everyone who finished any of the games walks away feeling like they played their own version of Geralt? So, why a Witcher? On paper, Geralt should have been the perfect protagonist for a linear action game. He's a professionally trained mutant monster hunter. He travels from village to village taking contracts to kill monsters. None of it was ours to choose, not his past nor his personality, not a single page of the novels written about him before these games even existed. That's not exactly the kind of character you expect to hand over to the player to make impactful story choices that carry across the franchise. But we do get the freedom to make them. Geralt is not your typical fantasy hero. We're used to knights, paladins and chosen ones who fight monsters because it's the right thing to do. Witchers don't care about that. They do it as it's a job that must be done by a professional. They must get paid. Witcher gear is expensive, life on the road ain't easy, and the world is not a welcoming place for a mutant.
I'll not drink with Weaverlost freaks.
In fact, most villagers don't like Witchers and don't even considering them human, but despite that, they are the only ones who can solve their problem. There is this quest in Novigrad that starts as a routine Witcher contract. A particularly bold beast, some assume to be an imp, has been stealing from merchants at the market. You're hired to track it down and kill it. You find out that behind the theft is a doppelganger, a creature that shapeshifts into whoever it wants.
Always the same old shit.
And he was only stealing to survive. Is he a monster? Does he deserve to die? We know that Geralt is skilled enough to deliver his head and get paid. But does your Geralt believe that this is the right thing to do?
I spare any monsters that aren't dangerous. Thing is, you attacked me, unprovoked, so that doesn't apply to you.
There were previous attempts to narrow the gap between the advantage of predetermined characters and blank slates. I think as games moved from 2D space into 3D, there was a push for RPGs to move from an isometric camera into a more cinematic experience without losing the player's agency of a blank slate protagonist. To add some possibilities in character creation to predetermine the character's flaws and traits, perks, background, that sort of thing. A good example I think will be Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. Shepard has a strong impact on the world, but still gives the player some freedom in character creation, unlike Geralt, where everything about him is predetermined. I call this type of protagonist a hybrid blank slate, and it's a great way to add more flavor to your playthrough, give the player more acknowledgement in the world. But there is something a predefined protagonist gives that no blank slate can. It's mystery. So, how do you introduce a predetermined character with decades of history without making them feel like the player missed half of the story? The magic trick of Amnesia. When the first game begins, Geralt remembers almost nothing about his past. If you never read the books, you're learning who he is at the same pace as he is. His friends, his enemies, even his own reputation slowly reveal themselves as the story unfolds. And there is such a strong sense of mystery and confusion to figure out what happened to him.
I lost my memory, but I want to know why everyone's so surprised to see me alive.
5 years ago, we were sitting in a tavern with friends, eating escargot, drinking vodka. A bloodthirsty mob attacked the non-human district. You went out into the street to scare them off, and then...
What?
Someone stabbed you in the stomach with a pitchfork. A fatal wound. There was nothing we could do.
Planescape Torment is the first RPG that comes to my mind that had a compelling predefined protagonist. And they also used Amnesia to introduce him. You play as the Nameless One, a man who's lived countless lives but remembers none of them. As you uncover his past, you realize he wasn't a hero. He's responsible for terrible things he can't undo. You have no control over his past, only his future. Years later, Disco Elysium did the same. You wake up after a blackout with no memory, not even your own name. The protagonist doesn't even know which year it is, but he's immediately called to solve a murder, despite not remembering at all how to do it. Later on you get to uncover that he's a brilliant but broken detective named Harry Dubois, whose past is one long string of failures and regrets. In each case, the protagonist's past is fixed. Their past is an interesting and compelling story that we get to uncover, but their future, that's entirely ours. I think what makes predefined protagonists so compelling is a deep and complex past. We might not be able to fix it, but we can help them deal with their unforgivable mistakes, and dealing with them lets us decide who they will become. Baldur's Gate 3 lets you create your own character from scratch. You choose your race, your class, your appearance, pretty much everything. Or you can add one of the origin characters, and yet, I think the Dark Urge is the game's true protagonist.
As soon as you delve into your mind, it is filled with flashes of 1,000 different dead.
Sure, they also begin the game with Amnesia, but just like Geralt, the Nameless One and Harry, that's only the beginning. The Dark Urge already has a past, and it's a terrifying one. As the story unfolds, you slowly discover who they were and why the urge for violence feels so natural. We know nothing about it. All we can do is learn to live with it until we confront their past. What belongs to the player is the answer to a single question: can I resist my nature? By the way, a predefined protagonist can work without an unknown mysterious past. Take Witcher 3 actually. Most players met Geralt for the first time here, not in the first game. By this point he already remembers everything, he knows exactly who he is. Looking at the story structure, one of the first characters we get introduced to during the tutorial is Ciri.
Wrong.
Geralt is training her in Witcher combat. Even if the player is new to the franchise, it's enough to see that Geralt is good at what he does and that he cares about her, that they are family.
No!
Then we get to the present day and we learn that she is missing. Geralt is searching for her. This is the mystery that lets the player relate to him. No matter what, Geralt is a father searching for his adopted daughter. What happened to her? And how far Geralt will have to go to save her. I think KCD and KCD2 are the first large-scale RPGs since Witcher 3 with this sense of freedom that lock you into a predefined protagonist, Henry. At the beginning, Henry knows exactly who he is. He is the son of a blacksmith. He has friends, family, a place where he belongs. I could say it appears to be a fairly happy life, and we get to experience it with him, see how his usual day looks, until we get through the worst day of his life, the day when he loses it all. I think what makes KCD games so unique is that it's a first-person RPG. Usually when we play these kind of games, we almost always have the option to create our own character. First-person view is first and foremost used to make us feel immersed. Here, despite it all, we get to feel immersed in the rough brutality of medieval Bohemia. We have chores, experience poverty, are forced to eat, learn to read, and even have to watch that Henry bathes. It's a very immersive experience to be forced to play as a medieval peasant who is not a fighter, noble, or a chosen hero. Henry is just a young man from a small village with no real combat skills, no money, and no idea what lies ahead. From now on, everything he becomes happens while we're there. We learn to fight alongside him, we get to earn his reputation, we watch him lose people who he cares about, and we get to decide what kind of man he'll grow into. So, what makes a predefined protagonist work in an RPG? I think it all comes down to player agency. We inherit their past, their friendships, their enemies, their regrets and the mistakes they've spent years trying to outrun. Then we get the freedom to decide how they face the consequences of those choices. We uncover their darkest secrets, confront the ghosts that have haunted them for years, and decide what comes next. Do they seek redemption? Do they repeat the same mistakes? Or do they become someone else entirely? We don't need to invent a character from scratch to feel like they're ours. As long as their story isn't finished and we're allowed to shape where it goes next, they become just as personal as any blank slate protagonist that we can create on our own. By the time the credits roll, it feels like we've earned our version of Geralt, our Nameless One, our Dark Urge, our Henry. Did Geralt kill the Blank-Slate Protagonist? No, not entirely. There are still new games that let you create a brand new character, and a lot of them come out every single year, but it's been a long time since I had a playthrough with a blank slate as memorable as Geralt himself. We want the world to react to the characters we play. If it doesn't, what's the point? Anyway, I like both, but would I prefer an empty blank slate over a well-written predefined character like Geralt? I don't think so. By the way, if you found this video interesting, feel free to subscribe, it tremendously helped to keep the lights on for this channel. I'd also love to know what you think about predefined protagonists. What's your favorite one, or do you prefer blank slates, or maybe some kind of hybrid? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.